caused them to be in that position may be charged some hefty fines of up to $1 million, US dollars that is, as well as jail term.
Welcome, Sports Nation, to Sports DTM, the sports channel where we call sports down the middle. You can expect the latest in sports news, views, and reviews from our resident analysts. No sports topic is too controversial, and no team or player is above criticism. So just smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell to make sure you don't miss out on our balanced offering of riveting sports content. And don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below. Welcome to Sports DTM.
Greetings, Sports DTM fans, and welcome to another episode of Sports Down the Middle, your channel of undiluted sports content. Your favorite analysts are here to provide their feedback on the latest happening in the world of sports. Now, the anti-doping case involving Nigerian sprinter Blessing Okagbare is being aggressively pursued by a major United States law enforcement agency. The investigations are being carried out under the Rodchenkov Act of 2019, passed by the United States government in December 2020. Analyst, talk to me. What does this mean, and what implication does this have on Blessing?
Well, Kurt, you see, this is being conducted pursuant to the very controversial Rodchenkov Anti-Doping Act. And this act essentially gives United States officials the power to prosecute individuals for doping schemes at international sports competitions involving American athletes. This act was passed in 2020, December 2020 to be exact. Now, the preamble to the act states that this act is to impose criminal sanctions on certain persons involved in international doping fraud conspiracies, to provide restitution for victims of such conspiracies, and to require sharing of information with the United States Anti-Doping Agency to assist its fight against doping and for other purposes. So it seems that they're somewhat criminalizing and making the act of doping now a fraud and creating some kind of scheme or conspiracy surrounding this. Now, specifically Section 3, which is a sum substance, and which I see being quoted or paraphrased in a number of articles globally, states that major international doping fraud conspiracies, A, in general, it shall be unlawful for any person other than an athlete, and this is important, so please remember this, to knowingly carry into effect, attempt to carry into effect, or conspire with any other person to carry into effect a scheme in commerce to influence by use of a prohibited substance or prohibited method any major international sports competition. The section continues. B. Extraterritorial jurisdiction. This is extraterritorial federal jurisdiction over an offense under this section. All right, so let's break it up into two. Part A. Now, you would note earlier, as I said, to remember that it expressly excludes other than an athlete. Now, most persons will read this section and see the word person and think that the use of the word person is speaking to the individual or individual. But in law, the word person can mean more than just an individual. It can extend to a corporation, a company, and in fact, in this particular act, it's similar to most acts, states that or defines the term person to mean an individual, partnership, corporation, association, or other entity. So when you read that section and you see the word person, you're not to interpret it as necessarily as an individual, but know that it can expand beyond an individual to include any of those terms: partnership, corporation, association, or other entity. So when we now see that it expressly excludes other than an athlete, and if we're looking and just using the current situation as an example, as a case study, this would therefore mean that this particular section has expressly excluded Blessing. Okay, so Blessing would not fall or Blessing's actions in this particular situation would not fall within the ambit of this section. All right. So then what does this mean then? What does it mean then if this United States law enforcement agency is pursuing an anti-doping case involving Blessing? Okay. It therefore means that they're probably looking into other things. They're probably looking into the circumstances surrounding how, when, where, whatever the case may be, why Blessing would have used this banned substance, right? And so to that effect, was it a conspiracy, to defraud or prohibit the other athletes who would have been in this competition from being able to compete on a fair and level playing field? And this could be anything. This could be, a club. This could be a organization. This could be a team. This could be a nation. I mean, the law itself, Rodchenkov Anti-Doping Act, is named after an infamous, or now famous, whistleblower who basically blew wide open the alleged doping scandal that took place at the Sochi Olympics, Winter Olympics in 2014. And he basically came out and said, listen, this was a state-wide and state-sanctioned initiative. And so from that, just having that background and just looking at how the section is worded, I don't think that it is aimed specifically at the individual, aka the athlete, but more so whatever circumstances around that athlete's scheme, as the case may be, or organization, or that exists, that first of all allowed for this to happen or required for this to happen. Okay, so I don't think, again, that it has any direct implications for Blessing specifically. It may require Blessing's corporation. Who knows? I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of their investigative processes, but based on how this section is worded, I do not believe that any of the sanctions that are imposed under Section 4, some of which are quite onerous, and I don't have to go into them now because I'm sure your colleagues will, explain them in this video, but I don't think that Blessing herself as an individual would be, I don't think she would have any exposure in that regard. I don't think she'd be found liable in that regard. Now, if we're looking at the second part now, the extraterritorial jurisdiction. Now, this is the part that I know some people might not fully understand, because there's a basic fundamental principle in international law that basically a state or a government will possess full control over affairs within a territorial or geographical area or limit. Basically, a state can only control what happens in its state, or whatever geographical or territorial area is deemed to be of that state. Now, and this territoriality principle serves as the basic principle of jurisdiction in international law, and jurisdiction is very important when it comes to when you are, applying law. You generally apply law that, is applicable in a specific jurisdiction. Now, however, national laws may be given extraterritorial application, provided that these laws could be justified by one of the recognized principles of extraterritorial jurisdiction under public international law. I'm not going to go into that. This is not a law lecture. But let's go back to the section, right, where it basically stated that, it shall be unlawful for any person to do these things at any major international sports competition. All right. So Section 2 of the Act defines what major international sports competition is. And in reading this definition, I'm going to somehow show you that there is some kind of nexus created between the United States and the and the act, right? Which is why I guess the United States is probably trying to justify and say, that they should have extraterritorial jurisdiction in such instances. So it says the term major international sports competition means a competition in which one or more United States athletes and three or more athletes from other countries participate. So there's a first form of nexus. You are, saying that, listen, one of our athletes has to be there and has to be participating along with three or more athletes from other countries. It goes further. A competition that is governed by the anti-doping rules and principles of the code, and this is the code as per the WADA anti-doping code, which was most recently adopted by WADA in March 5th, 2003. And thirdly, a competition in which one, the competition organizer or sanctioning body receives sponsorship or other financial support from an organization doing business in the United States. The competition organizer or sanctioning body receives compensation for the right to broadcast the competition in the United States. And all of these various definitions of competition includes a competition that is a single event or a competition that consists of a series of events held at different times, which, when combined, qualify an athlete or team for an award or other recognition. So if we're going back to the preamble, where they're saying that this law is to inter alia provide restitution for victims, it could be said that, or they could argue, this is United States, I don't know if they are, but they could argue and say that this law covers events or competitions in which our athletes are competing, or our local entities or businesses have financial interests or have invested in by way of sponsorship, or are going to be broadcast in the United States. And obviously usually those carry them some kind of fees, or some payments would have been made by the United States entity. And as such, if there was to be found any such kind of conspiracy or fraud from a doping perspective, which would then, cause damage or to our athletes, because they would not have been able to compete on a fair and open and level playing field, then we therefore have the right to seek some kind of restitution for those victims, aka our athletes, aka the businesses, the United States businesses, whoever. So I'm thinking that's probably what they're trying to do. However, I am aware from my research that WADA was very wary of this. It's very unusual. It's the first of its kind. Usually the convention that exists has been ratified or at least assented locally within the various countries who have signed to that convention. However, and by convention I'm referring to the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization International Convention Against Doping in Sport, which was done at Paris in October 19th, 2005, and ratified by the United States in 2008. However, none of the countries thus far who have either ratified it in law, domestic law, or who have assented have sought to expand their local legislation in such a way that it has extraterritorial jurisdiction. So WADA, of course, had concerns about this. They also don't want to diminish their role and responsibilities, and they don't want to water down any kind of investigation that they themselves would have to, undergo in situations like this. So hence why this act is so controversial. But going back to our main current concern, what if any are the implications for Blessing, her as an individual athlete? Based on reading the act, I don't see any such concern at this time. However, we would then have to look at the wider context, and that is where I will leave the conversation to your analysts to see if the circumstances surrounding Blessing's actions, if at any time or that can have any implication for any other person. And remember what I said person means: partnership, organization, or any other entity. Back to you, Kurt.
Thank you for that. Raymond, are there any other athletes who have tested positive for growth hormones, and what were the charges brought against them or penalties brought against them? Talk to me.
Yes, Kurt. So a quick search revealed some athletes, some famous, some not so famous, who tested positive for human growth hormone and their sanction. Tyson Gay was one of those athletes. If you guys remember, Tyson Gay from USA sprinter, big challenge to Usain Bolt and that time. He tested positive for human growth hormone, and as such he faced a sanction of 1 year, pretty much 1 year sanction, and that was in 2014. Dwayne Chambers, if you guys remember, Dwayne Chambers from Great Britain also tested positive for human growth hormone. He served a 2-year ban/suspension for testing positive, and that was in 2003. There is also Tim Montgomery. In 2000, he tested positive for human growth hormone, and he's spent pretty much handed down a 2-year suspension or 2-year ban from track. Also, Pavel Kravitsky. A lot of persons might not know this athlete. He's a hammer thrower, and he tested positive in 2015. He was one who got the most years sanction, or pretty much suspension, a 4-year suspension. So that's the max I've noticed so far, 4-year suspension. And of course, one note, not a sprinter, but an athlete nonetheless, Lance Armstrong, who admittedly took at the time human growth hormone. If you remember that athlete who got a lifetime ban, that cyclist, Lance Armstrong, his 7 titles was stripped from him back in pretty much 2012, when he admittedly took a number of steroids, including HGH, which is human growth hormone. So yeah, a little look down and search shows what it's like. The athletes who have taken it tested positive on a different sanction that they had received. Point of note is the Balco scandal is the biggest one ever, and funny enough, there's not so much human growth hormone in it, but more like the clear, I call it clean and clear, that's the TGH, I think, or THG, sorry, and so that had some of the most athletes taking that one.
Adrian, what's the latest on Blessing case?
With news emerging that a major U.S. law enforcement entity is investigating the Blessing Okagbare case, we take a look at where this case could go. Interestingly, Blessing Okagbare was barred from the Olympic Games, having competed in the first round after testing positive for human growth hormones. However, we have not heard much word from the World Anti-Doping Agency as it regards her B sample, but we have heard reports coming out of Nigeria that their House of Representatives have taken a special interest in that 10 athletes, it is reported, 10 athletes including Okagbare, were barred from the Olympic Games because of doping violations. This is serious. Could it be that the US authorities are onto something more than what they're telling us? Only time will tell. As for Okagbare, it's reported that she has received a 4-year ban, but that is unconfirmed, and if so, that would rule her out for a long time. And although the possibility still exists that she could be back in time for the next Olympic Games, but She has been out of the media for over a month. We haven't heard much from her, and we're looking forward to see how this case will turn out. We don't know if the authorities are looking to get information from her, as the act exempt athletes from being charged, although those around them and who would have in effect caused them to be in that position may be charged some hefty fines of up to $1 million US dollars, that is, as well as jail term. But for now, Okagbare waits patiently. I'm sure she's sweating. She hasn't broken her full silence as yet, but we hope to hear and to follow this story as news continues to emerge on this athlete who much was expected of in the Olympic Games but fell out due to this positive test for the human growth hormones. We watch it carefully, we look for our next step and take it from there.
There you have it, Sports DTM fans, another episode of Sports Down the Middle. Anti-doping case involving Blessing Okagbare is being aggressively pursued by a major United States law enforcement agency. Fans out there, we would love to hear from you by you leaving your comments in the comment section below. What's your thoughts on this news that Blessing is being investigated? Leave those comments in the comment section below, and always remember to like, to share, and to subscribe, and to tell a friend, tell a friend, tell a friend, tell a friend, tell all of them friends to come and join the Sports DTM family. This has been another episode of Sports Down the Middle. Be blessed.